I thought I would start by doing kind of my typical, our typical sort of summary of the numbers. Numbers today, 1.7 million cases worldwide, and that is a significant number. We've also crossed 100,000 cases of death across the world, which is another, unfortunately, bad milestone. What does that mean? I mean, the virus is progressing. The good news is about 372,000 people have recovered. In the US, we've hit almost 500,000, I believe 492,000 cases in the States, and we've crossed 18,000 deaths. Now, 18,000, I was thinking about that number as I was driving to the office to film this. 18,000 is a huge number. Remember, we lost around 3,000 9/11, and we're at 18,000 now. We're not near the worst part of this yet. About 27,000 people have recovered, which is good news. In North Carolina, 3,900 cases, 74 deaths. Again, North Carolina does not report the numbers of recovered patients here. So, I don't know what that means. Also, we have, as emergency physicians in the state, we have some real questions about the testing, because if you look at the numbers of positive cases in our area where there's a reasonable amount of testing, you would expect that similar levels will be found in other areas of the state, and we're not seeing that. And one of the reasons may be the testing is so low elsewhere in the state that we may be really underrepresenting the cases here. So today, we're going to do a little bit different. I've been talking about doing wellness, and I've been getting a ton of questions about supplements. And for those of you who know me, or you may have guessed, I'm a bit of a skeptic about stuff. And I'm a big believer in things if there is data to back it up. I'm a skeptic when people throw out things based on observation only and for incomplete data. And so I've gotten some comments that, you hate chiropractors and alternative health practitioners. That's far from the case. I refer people to chiropractors all the time. I have some very close friends who I respect very much who are chiropractors and alternative health practitioners. But they're like me. They do things by the book, and they do things based on data and evidence, not just because somebody said to do it and they didn't use their brains to sort of think through it. So we're going to talk a little bit about supplements and can they be used for either prevent the virus or treat it, and we're going to come to that in a little bit. I'm going to cover a couple little our normal update things today. There was a question, or Anthony Fauci talked about immunity cards, and somebody asked me, what's an immunity card? Well, we've talked about once you have the virus, then you're going to develop antibodies in your bloodstream to it, hopefully. Now, there's still some questions about that, but we think that's going to happen. And those antibodies are going to confer immunity. Now, when we talk about an antibody, what does that mean? Well, antibodies are these little tiny proteins that are produced by the body when it's exposed to a foreign substance. And it's a little bit like a little like tag, almost like a scarlet letter. So if an antibody sticks to a substance, whether it's a bacteria or a virus, or if you have an autoimmune disease against one of our own tissues, the body will attack it and destroy it. And that's a very good thing when we're fighting off an infection. So the idea is we get exposed to the coronavirus that causes COVID, we produce antibodies, and now that we have those antibodies floating around in our bloodstream, and it should protect us from getting sick again. Now, if we have a test, we think those tests are coming in the next little bit to see if we've got those antibodies, then you're presumably immune. So if you've got a positive antibody test, you should be able to get a little card, or you ever saw the movie Outbreak or Contagion, and the people had the wristbands that said that they had their immunization. Well, you should be okay. And like if you already had the virus, you could probably go back to work and everything else. So I think that some of that discussion is preliminary, but as we look forward months ahead, while we're kind of getting back to normal, once you had the virus, then you're good, and you're probably good to go back to work. The other thing with the antibody testing is that people ask me all the time, I was sick in November, December, January with similar symptoms. Did I have the virus? I don't know, but if you have an antibody test that's positive, then you can say, yes, you did have the virus, or no, you didn't, and you need to keep doing those precautions. 18,000 deaths is a lot. Is it the biggest cause of death in the US? No, not even close. Heart disease kills about 235,000 Americans every year. Cancer kills about 200,000 Americans every year. So those diseases are still far more dangerous and deadly than the COVID infection is. But just to give you some perspective, we've had 18,000 deaths, and we're predicting 60 to 100,000 deaths. And remember, that's about half of the number of people that die of cardiac disease. And in my other hat, we're going to enter my other world in this office where I'm a wellness doctor. Heart disease is one of the key things that we're always evaluating for because of the fact that it kills so many people. I'm also going to do a little bit of a rant. I might get into trouble for this, but it's annoyed me to no end that when I see, I work in the emergency department still. I work here full time. I only do, a relatively limited number of shifts in the emergency department. I used to work, 20, 22 a month, and now I work, much far fewer than that. Usually average about 5. But my colleagues that are doing that full time and are out in the front lines every single day, putting their lives on the line. Well, we just got notified by our emergency medicine group that they're cutting our pay by 20%, and they're cutting our hours. So that's the thanks that the emergency physicians, emergency nurse practitioners, and physician assistants are getting for doing all the hard work they're doing. And the same thing is happening on the nursing side as well, and techs and respiratory therapists. So all these people that are putting themselves on the line for all of us are basically, getting a certain finger from these administrative groups and hospitals and these big management groups that companies that own the emergency medicine doctors, essentially, that are owned by venture capitalists. And so that's my 2-minute rant. I posted something on my personal page yesterday. I don't think it's right. I don't know if there's anything we can do about it, but it seems pretty sad when the people that are putting their lives on the line to take care of everybody else. And, I don't know a single person since this started. I don't know a single nurse. I don't know a single respiratory therapist. I don't know a single tech. I don't know a single secretary, doctor, PA, nurse, physician's assistant that has said, I'm not going. I'm not coming to work. I'm afraid I'm putting my interests in front of everybody else. That has not happened one time, and this is the thanks that they're getting. Cut their pay, cut their hours, and at the same time, we're not going to provide you enough equipment, and we're going to make it more risky for you. So that's my 2 seconds of being hot, and let's move on to the topic at hand, which is, can we do things nutritionally, supplement-wise, lifestyle-wise to either A, treat COVID if we've got the virus. Remember, the virus is the coronavirus, the SARS-2 virus in particular, SARS-CoV-2. The disease we call COVID-19. I think I knew at one point why we called it COVID-19. I don't know. It seems like we could have a little catchier name than that. But regardless, we got 2 things here. One is we want to prevent people from developing the virus. And 2, we want to minimize the risk if you have the virus. And so what does that mean? It means that if we can boost our immune system, if we can be as healthy as possible, then maybe we reduce our risk of catching the virus in the first place. And we certainly know that we're going to reduce our risk of becoming seriously ill and ending up in an ICU. We know that 90% of the patients who are ending up in the ICU have pre-existing conditions, and that's typically diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, some other cardiovascular disease, things that are probably in many cases preventable and reversible. And that's what we do here at Vitality. And you can look at our website and send me questions about the things we do to really get ahead of these problems. But if you have them, you're at much higher risk. So if we can do those things lifestyle-wise to minimize those risks, we're going to do better with this. And it's very likely we're all going to end up with this virus at some point. So we want to do everything we possibly can to maximize our ability to fight it off. And so to that end, are there things we can do lifestyle-wise? Well, I've talked about, there's 5 things we always focus on in the clinic: nutrition, fitness, sleep, stress, and hormones. And the hormone piece probably isn't germane to this discussion. We'll do another talk about hormones another time. But the other things, nutrition, fitness, sleep, and stress, we have some control over, right? And so I've talked many times about the importance of good nutrition. And what is good nutrition? Well, good nutrition can be different things for different people. It depends if you've got underlying problems or not, if weight loss is a concern, if you're trying to train for an athletic event, you're trying to add muscle, you're trying to lean out, you want to fit into your dress for your daughter's wedding, or your tuxedo for your wedding, or whatever. Nutrition can mean different things for different people. But generally, if I were going to tell you, dispense a little bit of nutrition advice that is generally applicable to kind of everybody, what we want to do is avoid processed foods, try to stick with whole foods, organic produce, good things that come from the earth, from the land, that are not processed at all before we get them. So good quality meats and vegetables, good quality fish, chicken, and things like that. We talk about browsing on the outside of the supermarket. Those things that come in boxes typically have to be processed. And in order to get that, we end up with lots of problems. And I'm not going to really get into the whole, the fact that our food supply is essentially poison. That's another rant for another day. But nutrition is important. Fitness is important. And fitness, it might be training for a marathon. If that's what you're into, God love you. Not what I'm into, but I do CrossFit, and so people would think I'm crazy. But whatever it is, whether it's walking, whether it's weightlifting, whether it's Zumba, whether it is Burn Boot Camp, or any type of boot camp workout, or Orange Theory, there's a million different things, and now they're all available online. And so there's really no excuse to not do something. Every day, you need to get up and you need to move. You need to do something, and you need to get the blood moving, the muscles limber, and try to add strength. I've talked about it a few times that I think we should leave this quarantine healthier than we went into it, because we've got the time and we can do it. And with some good, advice and direction, and hopefully we're going to be able to provide some of that for you, we should be able to get out of this better than we went in. Sleep is key and very important as well. We need to get good sleep, and that means good quality sleep. And there's a couple key things. And I always talk to people, our patients, about sleep hygiene. Sleep hygiene means that you go to your bedroom to sleep, not to watch TV, not to read, not to use your iPad, because it's a little bit like classical conditioning. If that's what you do every time, then your body expects you to be watching TV when you go to sleep. If the TV is playing in the background, you're never fully asleep, I think. Those television things get incorporated in your dream, and your quality of sleep is poor. Temperature control, cool is better. Light control is important. Sometimes white noise can be helpful. Melatonin is a great supplement. We're talking about supplements today. Melatonin is an excellent adjunct, and sometimes you have to use relatively high levels of melatonin, and maybe we'll do a talk on melatonin because it's a fascinating molecule, highly anti-inflammatory, antioxidant, may prevent may help the body with apoptosis in fighting off cancer and some other things. So melatonin can be helpful. Getting a good sleep schedule is important. And it's a little weird, right? We're all sort of trapped at home, and it should be easy, right? But I don't know about anybody else, but for me, I find myself like with a weird schedule. Like I'm a night owl anyway. I've worked nights in the ER my entire career, and even though I work days in my clinic, I'm still sort of a night person built in, and so my sleep schedule is a little bit messed up. I'm sure that's not an uncommon thing. And the last one is stress. And stress, there are two types of stress. One of them is the stress of, boy, I've got 6 projects to do, or I'm really stressed that I have to be at this place and I'm far away and I'm worried about it. And then there's sort of physiologic stress, and that stress is, it's a good example. Okay, I walk over to the door of my office and I open it up, and Jason Voorhees is there with his hockey mask and a machete. And my brain goes, serial killer. And immediately I have a physiologic stress response. My adrenal glands release epinephrine and norepinephrine and cortisol. My heart rate jumps up, blood starts pumping to my brain and my muscles. I'm ready to fight or flight. And you've all experienced that. And I'll tell you when. You're in your car and you have a near miss. Somebody pulls out in front of you, you just miss it, and you slam on your brakes and you're stopped. And then what happens? A split second after that happens, you feel your heart jump in your chest. And it's beating fast. That's that surge of stress hormones going into you. Now, that's very important when we're fighting off bears or being chased by serial killers. Not so important if we are dealing with stress every day. But if stress levels are really high and we combine that with poor nutrition and no fitness and poor sleep, we can start getting a physiologic stress response to everyday occurrences. So this, the fact I've got to film this lecture tonight, that little bit of stress turns into being a big stress. I'm getting chased by a serial killer. And when that happens, it lowers our immunity. And we're talking about immunity today. So we tend to get sick easier. Also, if we're trying to lose weight, we can't do it. Your body will not give up fat if you have high cortisol levels. And so I promise we will do a whole talk on adrenal fatigue and its relationship to thyroid disease at another time. But those 4 things, nutrition, fitness, sleep, and stress, are really important. Now, the next question is, what about supplements? Are there supplements that I can take that will prevent the virus? Well, I will give you a very long and detailed answer to that. No, there isn't. There's nothing that's been proven that's going to prevent anything. However, there are some things that should help, and there are some substances that are very effective, in particular, in fighting off viral infections. And one of those things is zinc. And zinc is an ion. It's a charged molecule, and it tends to have the effect of disrupting an enzyme that the viruses need to reproduce called replicase. And replicase is the enzyme that they use to reproduce more copies of the virus. And remember, I've explained this once or twice, that the way the virus works is that it attaches to a healthy cell, it invades that cell, it takes over the machinery, the genetic machinery of the cell, and stops the cell from doing everything else it does to just make more virus particles. So one particle goes in, and that cell makes tens of thousands of other virus particles. And when the whole area they're all in the cell, like, next to each other like that, then what happens is it kills the cell, and all those virus particles spread out, and then they all go infect other cells, and it goes on and on and on. So zinc has been shown to inhibit that replicase and that enzyme that causes those virus particles to replicate. So if we get zinc into the cell, it's important. However, zinc has got a +2 charge, meaning that it really doesn't want to go into the cell. It doesn't go in easily. And I generally recommend our patients take about 100 milligrams of zinc every day, but you really need to get that zinc into the cell. If it's just floating on the outside, it doesn't do very well. And there are a couple things that are called ionophores that help transport zinc from the outside to the inside. And the most common one that we use is called quercetin, and it's a supplement that you can take. So if you're taking zinc, you should probably take quercetin with it, and the quercetin helps transport the zinc from outside across the lipid membrane of the cell inside, where it can do good. There's another substance called I don't even want to try to pronounce it, but it's basically called EGCG that also does it. And also, we think that chloroquine, the malaria drug that has been, we've been talking about on and on about whether it helps or not. Chloroquine actually is known to help enhance zinc absorption. And so if these randomly controlled trials that we're doing, which are, there's 15 or 16 going on worldwide, which we should get some preliminary data in the next couple months, that maybe that's part of the mechanism why the hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine would be helpful in terms of a virus. So that's one thing. The next one is vitamin C. And I've gotten plenty of questions about vitamin C. And vitamin C is a very benign vitamin and very powerful antioxidant. It's a cofactor for a lot of enzymes, and particular enzymes that are involved in our immune response. So if we've got adequate levels of vitamin C, our immune system is going to be kind of primed and ready to go. And so that's important. It decreases inflammation. And there's a number of randomly controlled trials. We talked about peer review. What's a randomly controlled trial? Well, that's another kind of key. Those are kind of the most important studies, because they're the ones that give us the best data. In a randomly controlled trial, you have one group that gets an intervention, let's say vitamin C, and another group that doesn't get it, they get a placebo. And it's random, so we don't know who in which group, you get a bunch of people, you don't know who's getting what. And generally it's blinded, meaning that nobody knows. The people are in the study don't know, the researchers don't know, it's all coded and everything. And then once the study's done, they compare the two groups, the group that got it and the group that didn't get it. And if you can see a difference, that's very, very powerful evidence that there's actually a difference there. If you don't see a difference, then it's, it may not be true. So there's a number of randomly controlled trials that show vitamin C decreases the duration of respiratory illnesses that are caused by viruses. So I think vitamin C, 1 or 2 grams a day, or a good quantity of citrus fruits are going to be very helpful. Are they going to prevent the virus? No. Are they going to help you potentially fight it off earlier? Yeah, it may well. Is it going to cure? If you've got COVID, is it going to cure you? No, but may it help? Yeah, it's going to help. Other important question is, can it hurt you? Well, no, you can't get hurt by vitamin C. Linus Pauling, who was a Nobel Prize winner, was famous for advocating very massive doses of vitamin C. But I think 1 to 2 grams a day would be a good amount. Vitamin D is another one. In our latitude, in the majority of the United States, vitamin D is an interesting substance because we don't produce it between about October and April because it has to do with the angle of the sun. My wife got a master's of public health and a master's in social work at Boston University while I was chief resident at Boston Medical Center. And there was a crazy guy, professor at BU School of Public Health, who actually did this great experiment where he took students and he had them sunbathe on the roof of the public health building every day for a year, and they measured the vitamin D levels. And that's where they discovered that because of the angle of the sun, doesn't matter how sunny it is in January, you just really don't make any vitamin D from the sun during that time. So we know that vitamin D levels are very low at this time of year. This is probably the lowest time between about February and April where our vitamin D levels get low. And we check vitamin Ds routinely in our patients, and they're always pretty low at this time of year. It's interesting because those low vitamin D levels correspond with what? With flu season and a lot of other viral illnesses. And there have been some case reports of vitamin D being a very potent way of fighting off viral infections. There was an H1N1 outbreak. There was a case report about an H1N1 outbreak in a nursing home, I believe in the Midwest. And I think there were, 60 or 70 residents and a number of staff members, and they had an H1N1 outbreak. And they had 30 or 40 cases. And what it turned out to be, all the staff members got it and only one resident got it, which is interesting because it really should be the opposite, right? And they went back and they found out that the doctor that was managing the nursing home was a big advocate of vitamin D, and he made sure that they all had adequate levels of vitamin D. And when they measured these people, they all had really good levels of vitamin D, and they didn't come down with H1N1. Now, it's a different virus than corona, but maybe it's applicable, we don't know. The only one resident that got it was a new person who just got there and had a low vitamin D level. So maintaining adequate levels of vitamin D is important. I generally recommend 3,000 to 5,000 units a day of vitamin D in the wintertime and maybe a little bit less during the summertime. B complex vitamins are important. You can take a multi-B supplement if you want to. That works from on different levels of immunity. So those are some sort of classic supplements that work, will improve your immunity and maybe make it a little bit, maybe that much harder for the virus to take hold in your own body, and also maybe give you a little bit of extra ammunition if you should, develop the virus yourself. Now, also there are some other things. Elderberry, I get asked about. Boy, if I don't get asked about elderberry 3 times a day, something's wrong. Elderberry is a very interesting substance because it's been shown in vitro to be antibacterial and virucidal, meaning that if you put bacteria in a petri dish and you pour in elderberry, a lot of times it kills the bacteria. Same thing with viruses. And we think it's got a positive effect on immune response. It stimulates immune response. There has been some controversy because one of the problems that patients who develop COVID have is this thing called cytokine storm. And what's a cytokine? A cytokine is a type of chemical that's released in an immune response. And what we're seeing is that sometimes these patients get this overly aggressive immune response, and it causes the body to shut down, essentially. And there's a thought that since elderberry is a cytokine kind of enhancer, and normally it's good. If you have an infection, you want to have a little bit of cytokine because it stimulates the immune response. But these cases, that system's gone crazy, right? And so there's been some concern about, will elderberry perhaps, cause you to have a cytokine storm? I don't think there's any good evidence that it's dangerous, honestly. Would I use it every day? I don't. I think if you're taking it, keep taking it. There's been a number of randomly controlled trials with elderberry that shows that it reduces the duration of viral upper respiratory infections. Again, do we know if elderberry works against the coronavirus? We don't. But, it's not unreasonable when you have things that have trials that work, have virucidal or antiviral properties. There's no reason to think that there's not a possibility. And if you've got something like elderberry, which is safe to use, I would say use it. I wouldn't not use it. I wouldn't drink 5 gallons of it, but I would, the little shot glass or whatever that you normally do, I think is perfectly fine. Astragalus is a Chinese herb that's been used for, really for centuries, probably longer than that, to boost immunity. And there's actually some good studies that show indeed it does have a positive effect on immunity. The other thing is that selenium is a mineral, that essential mineral that we need to get, and a lot of us are selenium deficient. And there have been animal studies that show that animals that have inadequate levels of selenium have a difficult time fighting off viruses. And there was another study that showed in animals that they recovered from the H1N1 virus, which again, different than corona, more quickly when they were given selenium. So taking a little bit of selenium as a supplement is not going to hurt you. There's lots of crazy things out there that we talked about drinking tonic water the other day, and the amount of tonic water you'd need to get a therapeutic dose of quinine would be 57 liters, and it's about 10 gallons, and you basically die. You can die of water intoxication after drinking 2 or 3 gallons of water in a short period of time. So that's probably not a great place to eat your quinine. Plus, there's never been anything that links quinine and coronavirus. They're just saying, well, quinine's a malaria drug and chloroquine's a malarial drug, so they must work the same. Well, there's nothing that's been published that shows that. I'm going to move from the supplement talk, and you notice I didn't mention 50 million supplements. Again, I'm trying to give you reasonable data that has some science behind it, and I think that list of things, in particular the zinc, the vitamin C, the quercetin, all have pretty good science behind it. The vitamin D, and certainly the lifestyle pieces. We can talk another time about some of the other things that are purported, but again, I looked at probably 100 different supplements to talk about today, and those are the ones that I had data for, that there's science behind it that seems reasonable. I'm not the brightest guy in the world, but I read these things, I try to be skeptical, and if it kind of passes my sniff test, I try to bring it to you. I would say double check me. If you can find them wrong, come back and let me know. I'm fallible, I'm not perfect, and I'm not worried about being wrong. I'm going to scroll up and look at some of the questions if you guys don't mind. Let's see here. A lot of hellos from different people. You study from the particles can drift to 27 feet. Yeah, I did see that. I didn't get a chance to read it, but there's a study that was looking at how far particles of virus can drift. And there was a study in Finland that said it was 27 feet. Now, I just saw the headline and I bookmarked it, but I haven't read it yet. So I don't know what it is. A lot of times, these are in laboratory conditions. So if you sit somebody like in a warehouse with perfectly still air, and you have somebody cough in a particular direction, they probably don't match up to the real world. But I don't know what that study shows. So I'll look at it and I'll try to get back maybe tomorrow and give you an update on that particular study. There was another study that I saw today, though, that looked at masks. And we've talked about masks, and they did a study to see about people that had the virus when they coughed, what percentage of those coughs produce send out virus and expelled virus. And at like 30% of the people were actively expelling virus when they were coughing or breathing. And then they put masks on those. And it was a tiny study. So remember, I don't like tiny studies, but I think this is pretty reasonable. I think it makes sense. They put masks, just regular cloth masks on those people, on another 10 people had it, and they didn't detect any viral transmission. So the mask was enough to block any virus coming out of the lungs with a cough or with breathing. So again, while we talk about wearing masks, to protect other people in case you have it and don't know. That was from Melissa. Thank you for the question. Why the cut? Yeah, listen, I appreciate the support about my rant about them cutting the salaries of the people on the front line. Um, the Yeah, which what takes when corporations take over healthcare. Yes, melatonin is not an option if you have a high blood pressure. Question mark. I don't think melatonin is contraindicated in hypertension. I've never read anything to that effect. I will double check. I don't like to ever just talk off the cuff without, but I've been prescribing for my patients for about 10 years now. So I've never had any problems with people that have hypertension taking melatonin. And if you look at, melatonin is a hormone produced by the pineal gland, which is deep, deep in your brain. And in its normal physiologic form, it doesn't have any cardiovascular effects. It's more of an anti-inflammatory, and it helps people get into the deep modes of sleep. So I wouldn't think it would have an impact on hypertension, but I promise I'll look that up. My daughter Addie is watching from home. Addie, will you write that down for me so I can look it up, please? Thank you. No zinc anywhere, not on Target or Whole Foods. Just keep looking. It's a really simple thing to make. It'll get restocked. And I guess maybe what we can do is post a list. I guess we have to do something where we can get people's emails so I can provide some PDFs and things like that. I'll see if I can find a list of zinc-containing foods, because generally, if our nutrition is good, we don't really need a lot of supplements. My patients know I'm not a huge supplement user, except maybe in folks who are reversing Alzheimer's or reversing diabetes. In those cases, we use some more. Sometimes with weight loss, we use a little bit more. But for normal healthy people, I say, you get your vitamins, you get your supplements from eating well, and that's important. Lupus, Plaquenil, actually, and I have, so you got lupus and you're on Plaquenil. Should you be taking some zinc? Yeah, definitely. Remember, we think that that it's an ionophore and it will help get that zinc into the cell. Remember, zinc is got a 2+ charge on it, so it won't go into the cell alone. It's got to be kind of like somebody's got to hold its hand and drag it through. It won't go through on its own. Zinc and tonic water for the quinine. Okay, so Tamara, I don't know if that was before or after I just talked about quinine. No evidence at all that quinine has any effect on the virus, and the amount of quinine that you get in tonic water is regulated by the FDA. It can't be more than 83 milligrams per liter. And assuming that we're using quinine, if there was even the slightest shred that it does anything, it hasn't been studied yet. But let's for the sake of argument, say that quinine does have an effect on the coronavirus. Well, we would dose it in a similar way that we dose it for malaria, just like we're dosing hydrochloroquine the same way we dose for malaria. And it's generally 2 650 milligram tablets of quinine every 8 hours, so 3 times a day. So if you only are getting 83 milligrams in a liter, that would translate to 57 liters of tonic water a day to get that dosage. So I would imagine, besides being deadly, that would be hard to accomplish. And please don't try it. Let's see here. How about vitamin C infusions? We do IV vitamin infusions, and vitamin C might be a reasonable treatment for mild coronavirus infections or to prevent, but again, no studies. So to say so would be irresponsible on my part. You would think, mentally it would make some sense. It would be helpful. There are IV NAD. There are a few other things that, IV therapies that might enhance our immune response. We use them for that reason, but I hesitate to give an opinion because there's not been studies that have looked at it. And without studies, I'm very hesitant to give any credence to it. Let's see. Lindsay, you can't really overdose on vitamin C, Melissa, no. Vitamin D. So, there's a lot. Vitamin D is sort of like, oh my gosh, you can overdose on vitamin D. And I'll tell you a funny story. And if the doc's watching, he's a good friend of mine, so he'll appreciate it. So, very often if we have people that have really low vitamin D levels, we typically will place them on, I'll tell people to take 5,000 units a day. And I had a patient that came in with relatively low, not really low, but relatively low vitamin D. And I put him on 5,000 units a day. And he called me up about a week later and said, hey, I went to my doc, and he said that, I'm going to overdose on that dosage you gave me. So he wrote me a prescription for what we typically, most doctors, when they treat low vitamin D, we write a prescription for a 50,000 unit capsule once a week. And he put me on 50,000 units a week because 5,000 a day is too much. And the doc happened to be a friend of mine. And I called him up and I said, hey, listen, I know I'm just an emergency doctor. I'm not the brightest, bulb on the Christmas tree, but tell me, 7 days times 5,000 units, is that a bigger number than 50,000 or a smaller number than 50,000? And he kind of did the face plant and he said, oh, it just seemed like a lot. You're not going to get in any trouble at that level. The folks, every once in a while we'll have a report of vitamin D intoxication. Almost invariably, it's someone who had a compounded medicine that was mixed wrong. Instead of getting 50,000 units, they got 500,000 units, and they use it for 2 or 3 months and then develop symptoms. So yes, it's possible to overdose on vitamin D. If you keep it at 5,000 units or below, you're going to be fine. Midwife and nurse midwifery in Edinburgh, Scotland, and we use rose hips and tinctures, an excellent vitamin C source. Yeah, so rose hips are loaded with vitamin C. And a lot of these old-time remedies, they're based in science. We go back and look at them, and these people weren't dumb. And they, how do they learn? They learn by observation and experimentation. Just like we do in science these days. They said, hey, I think this might work. They did it with a bunch of people. Hey, it works, so let's keep using it. And it got into folk legend and transmitted through the ways. Do not reboot my computer. What about these supplements for those taking blood thinners? Okay, I think you got to talk to your doctor about blood thinners. Certainly things like vitamin K are obviously contraindicated in blood thinners because it reverses things like Coumadin. So if you're on a blood thinner, I would talk to your physician prior to doing anything. My nurse Scarlett is on. Hey, Scarlett. Difference between vitamin D and D3. There are different forms of vitamin D. Vitamin D3, I think, is better absorbed, and I generally recommend that one. But I think if you're getting adequate amounts of either one, it's fine. Tonic water and zinc. Jane, I've talked about that a couple times. You can't get very much quinine out of the tonic water, but zinc definitely. I would prefer zinc and quercetin together. That would be a better combination. Dosages. So generally, dosages for zinc, about 100 milligrams a day. For quercetin, I usually recommend 500 milligrams twice a day. Vitamin C, 1 to 2 grams a day. And elderberry, I know it's usually a little shot glass for it. I've got to look. It's probably some direction in the bottle. If you want more information, we're going to start putting together an email list. And I think in the future, we're going to do these so you can leave your email and you can get some stuff for us. But if you want, I'll write up a little summary of this. And if you want a copy of it, if you private message, actually, you know what? If you just email info@vitalitymwi.com. So info@vitality, M as in Michael, W as in water, I as in insane.com. I'll put together a PDF over the weekend and I will email it to you. And I'll add you to our list and you can, we'll be able to get some communication and get anything we post in the future. Please, guys, remember, I'm learning as I go here. I'm a relatively savvy tech person, but I don't know anything about social media. I'm doing most of this stuff on my own, and so I'm learning as I'm going. Hopefully, our quality will improve, and we'll get a little bit more. We'll get better at this as things go on. Let's see here. Does it say take these well? Breastfeeding. I would again just talk to your pediatrician. I don't want to give you the wrong answer, and it's not something I hold in my forebrain, so I don't know the answer to that. I apologize. Have you heard of any contraindications for using albuterol? Asthma has been an issue over the past couple of weeks from allergies. No, I think if you got asthma, go ahead and use albuterol. The things that we've been worried about are using nebulizer treatments on infected patients in the hospital because a nebulizer aerosolizes the albuterol and it goes everywhere. So if you happen to be in the hospital and you have COVID, then we're going to be very concerned about using a nebulizer. And actually, we're using inhalers now in those patients to keep the spread. And that may be why it may be difficult to get your albuterol inhaler because they're being used in the hospital instead of nebulizer treatments. But at home, it should be fine. Animals, is yogurt, yogurt to help with this virus? Well, yogurt, that's a great question, Lynn. Is yogurt to help with this virus? No, it's not, but it's still a great question because, yogurt is it's a fermented food. It's loaded with bacteria, and gut flora is really important. And we'll probably do a whole talk just on gut health. But if you've got a healthy gut flora, then your ability to fight off infections is enhanced. And so getting some fermented food, yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, pickles, a couple of those other fermented type foods are really going to enhance your gut biome. A good probiotic is probably really important. I think especially at this time with everything going on, a good gut health is important. We'll talk about that another time. Any particular considerations of anemia due to celiac? I think that's a case where you really need to be getting good levels of vitamin B, B12 in particular, because absorption can be a problem, and then it can lead to microcytic anemia and more problems. Let's see here, and that's it for my questions. So listen, everybody, happy Good Friday. I hope everybody enjoys themselves. We did film the WCNC spot, and I will tell you, we filmed it 7 times today before Carolyn and I realized that you cannot record a FaceTime call. So we have actually, just before this, we re-recorded it. It's going to get posted, and it's going to be something we're going to be doing on WCNC every Friday, answering some common questions. So we actually have it filmed. We just have not been able to. We filmed it yesterday morning and then 7 times today. But the 7th time we got lucky and we got it done. I'll be back tomorrow with an update. It's Easter weekend. Try to do something for somebody else this weekend. Be it a neighbor, be it a friend, be it a long-lost relative. Look after yourselves. Look after your families. Love on your families this weekend. It's a really special weekend. And at least down here in the Carolinas, it's going to be a beautiful weekend, I think. Look after your fellow man and woman. I will be back tomorrow. Stay safe. Don't worry, and wash your hands. Happy Easter, happy Passover, and I'll talk to you soon.